Australia has very good elections. One thing you can be sure of in this country is that stuff gets counted. I scrutineered this election and all parties send in their people to do so. So it's kind of impressive how good our system actually is. And it remains one of, if not the best in the world. None of that weird American stuff of disappearing ballots here. But this week came the news that there was a bit of a mistake made by the Australian Electoral Commission. Not one that affected the outcome of any seat or anything, but a bit problematic nonetheless. It was the ABC that broke the news.
This is a story uncovered by the ABC investigations team. 1,866 ballot papers from the seat of Barton were found in the home of a temporary AEC worker last week, taken home, as you've said, after the May 3rd election. Now, the Electoral Commission says it is obviously taking this very seriously and investigating exactly how this was able to happen. But essentially what they've said has taken place, as far as they know, is that these ballot papers were boxed up and packaged in front of scrutineers, and they were due to be delivered to a central location. But when those boxes arrived at that central location, there was one less than expected that arrived.
Okay, so what's important to note about this story is that the votes went missing after they were counted, when the box was recovered. The seal on it had not been broken, and when the votes were recounted, they matched the original count undertaken before it went missing. So there was no serious issues of anything untoward here. But how does this stuff happen? The AEC response hasn't been great, and they didn't alert anyone first. The ABC had to pick up the story. Good to see the ABC doing its job well for a change. So not really anything to worry about there, John, do you think? Or is this a sign that maybe we need to tighten things up a bit, the AEC?
Look, there just has been basically next to zero electoral fraud in Australian history. Okay, now some people may disagree, but I'll tell you I'm right. There's a couple of reasons for that. If there was going to be wholesale fraud that was going to change the result of elections, who would be doing it? It would be hardcore Liberal Party operatives and hardcore Labor Party operatives. Well, guess what? Those people, there'd have to be a team of them. These people very often have falling outs with each other. It might be in 3 years' time. And they've always got blackmail over them. You can basically go to jail for organised election fraud. So that's why it's not happening now. Now, it's also, I don't believe in compulsory voting, but that also basically stamps it out. Okay, because everyone has to go get their name ticked off. Okay, but in the United States, where often 30% of people don't vote, you can find out who's not going to vote and go and vote for them. Okay. But look, there is the potential for fraud. I don't believe it's happening, but there is the potential for fraud. So I am a big believer in saying you've got to turn up with some form of ID before you can vote, which is not the case at the moment. There is a big gap there.
Right. So we have got some holes to plug. Okay, so the ABC is going to undergo a post-election coverage review. This is where I think some of the shenanigans really do go on in the beforehand, before an election. This election coverage review for the ABC is routine. It happens after every election. But the problem I have with it is the way that it's done. They always measure what we call in the PR business share of voice, which means how much airtime a particular political party gets. They never do tone of voice, which is what the slant of that coverage is, whether it's negative or positive or neutral. Or, even more subtly, what are the underlying assumptions? What's the cultural lens, if you like, of how the stories are covered? And this is a point made by former ABC board member Joe Gersh this week. ABC election review must probe bias, says former board member Joe Gersh, reads the headline from the Australian newspaper. Former ABC board member Joe Gersh has called on the national broadcaster to conduct a comprehensive review of its coverage of the recent federal election campaign to ensure that it doesn't become a mouthpiece of government under Labor's super majority. Mr. Gersh, who served on the ABC board for 5 years through to 2023, says the extraordinary election result warrants a more in-depth review than usual. Inevitably, the ABC will conduct a review of the coverage of the 2025 election campaign, and as usual, it'll likely find what it was looking for, namely compliance with its impartiality charter created by means of an audit-like approach to airing voices from both sides of the political debate. The ABC should look beyond this quantitative measure of balance and focused instead on the qualitative. Was it objectively objective, he says. Mr. Gersh says that a more significant question is that of the ABC's perspective of where the political parties themselves sit on the political spectrum. That's the Australian newspaper reporting on that there. So I totally agree with that. Rob, to come to you first on this one. It's not the amount of airtime that they're giving to each party, it's the way these stories are slanted, and it's that whole worldview lens that every ABC thing starts from. And we have a bias on this show. We declare it up front, but we're not asking you to pay for this show, right? I'm sick of listening to Who's the Woman from Gadigal Land on ABC radio every 5 seconds.
Yeah.
It's just endless, the left-wing slant.
Look, when I say we need to have the fight, we need to have the fight. And so as I said before, the left have a worldview, they have certain incentives, and their media and outlets and their institutions and all their organizations, they just gatekeep anything outside that. So, an example of, say, Susan Lay's been picked as the Liberal Party leader, and you have to actually probably attack the idea of fixing a woman problem at its core. Have some, or even you mentioned Gadigal land. I mean, what's the basic assumption under this? That this is Gadigal land and it's not Australia. Well,
Right.
Attack that. Have the spine to get on mainstream TV and say, you know what, Australia was largely settled, and to be honest, a lot of good's come out of it. Not saying it was perfect, but I don't think we've actually, in toto, in the grand scheme of things, have anything to continually apologise for. I think we can help.
Effectively, we've got $1.2 billion going into a propaganda machine to drive assumptions and beliefs and values from this sort of elite left-wing group that have control of this national broadcaster.
Exactly. Do you think they would ever have anyone who said, I think that we don't actually have anything to apologise for as a country? Do you think they would let that happen on the ABC?
No.
And do you think many people who actually believe that would get up and do it on the ABC? That's what I mean about having the fight.
John, do you feel that the Libertarians were given a fair run on ABC during the election?
Well, okay, they just basically ghosted us. Okay, they love the Greens, the ABC during the election night coverage. You watch the 7 o'clock ABC News, and they talk about what Peter Dutton did today, and they talk about what Anthony Albanese did today. Then they have a little segment on the Greens. What other minor party gets that amount of fluff? And you turn on the ABC radio, Greens. Now, one of the great tragedies of the recent Canadian election is that very good opposition leader had promised to privatise the CBC, which is their ABC. And, just like the ABC, government funded, government owned, and surprise, very left wing. Want a bigger government. Okay, now, I blame Trump for, I love Trump. Okay, I loved him from the beginning, loved him since the 1980s. Okay, but I blame Trump for poor old Pierre losing. Okay, and that is a real tragedy because he could have showed us how good it is to privatise the national.
Yeah. So Pierre Poilievre, you're talking about the Conservative Party leader in Canada who just recently lost the election but gained a lot of seats and votes and has certainly shifted the debate in the right direction over there.
Well, I hope he can stay on as opposition leader. I think he's lost his seat.
No, I think they're making a seat for him. They've got someone stood aside someone has stood aside, so he'll be staying in Parliament. Yeah.
Look, he was unlucky. The poll said for a mile he was going to win and win by a mile, and then Trump then comes out, starts mucking around about the 51st state, which is just trolling them about, but it freaks Canada out. Then he does, in the real world, whack up all these tariffs. Okay, so the poor old Canadians thought we're under attack from the world's most powerful country, who also happen to be our only neighbour. So they're thinking they just circled the wagons. They united behind the leader who said, get lost, Trump.
Yeah, it was a sad state of affairs and bad timing on his part. But I think at the end of the day, Canada needs a bit of a wake up and a shift. But as you say, one of the reasons he's still there is because of the fact that the Canadian Conservative Party does elect its leader from the party base. Anyway,
absolutely.
We better take a quick break. We'll be back in a second with more. The other side doesn't get more than $1 billion of taxpayers' money to bring you news from a centre-right perspective like the ABC does to bring you news from a left-wing perspective. In fact, we don't get a red cent from the government. We need voluntary donors and supporters like you to keep going and growing. And we hate asking for charity, so we've done a deal with what we think is the world's best VPN, virtual private network service. It'll keep you and your family truly safe without slowing down your internet speeds, and you can watch Netflix or other streaming services using your regular accounts with them as if you're viewing from any country in the world. And you can sign up for less than $3 a month and get a whopping 83% off the normal price. Just go to piavpn.com/otherside to sign up and get more info. That's piavpn.com/otherside. That was a segment from a recent episode of our fortnightly news commentary show, The Other Side, with me, Damien Curry. If you liked it, support us. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube right now so you don't miss a thing. It's totally free. Just click that subscribe button and the little bell. And check out our Other Side Unplugged show too, and join our mission to actually do something and change Aussie media for the better at othersidetv.com.au. That's othersidetv.com.au. Check it out now.